Good morning. Welcome once again to the Networking Roundtable. As always, we have a really great, group of people here who are going to help us out. The subject for last month was embracing the changes, and we're going to continue that conversation plus a lot more. And we are going to get all that from our guests. Today we have with us Colleen King. Colleen has received her Master of Business Administration degree from the University of Redland. She started her agency in 2003. She has helped small businesses. She's a two-time past president of the Ventura County chapter of the National Association of Women Business Owners. That's, you heard me run out of breath, so that's a lot. We also have with us Russell Lookadoo, who's otherwise known as the HR guy. Russell's credentials, he's got a consulting firm specializing in helping businesses leaders accomplish their goals by effectively using their teams. And Russell is going to tell us a lot more about that, but not before we introduce my co-host for today from Q&A Flores, who is the networking organization that brings us all these really great professionals from which we learn. Yasmin Flores. Hello, Yasmin. All right. So let's jump right into it. We had our previous meeting. We talked about embracing the changes, and because of everything that has been going in the world, quite a bit of things have changed, but a lot of things have actually changed the same, have they not? So I kind of want to jump in and start relaying some questions. Colleen, do all people have to have health insurance in today's climate?
Well, anytime you ask an insurance person that, we'll say yes. There's been a lot of confusion on this in the last administration. There were challenges to what's called the individual mandate. Technically, according to federal law, yes, you are required to have health insurance, but the penalties were removed. The penalty for not being insured is zero. So on the federal level, you do, but there's no penalty if you don't. But here in California, being California, the legislature passed a law requiring people to have health insurance, and the penalties that were applied to that were the same as the federal. So short answer is yes, you still need to have insurance.
Right. Now, the types of insurance that people have access to, depending on age or having been previously employed, things like COBRA, obviously individual health plans or Medicare. So do those all fall under that category?
What you mean as far as qualifying as being insured? Yes.
Yes. Yeah. So if I am of age to get Medicare, but I don't, have Medicare, do I get penalized?
You need to have something. You need to have what's considered qualified medical coverage. There are a lot of mini med plans, as they're called, where they basically will say, okay, you get 5 office visits at $25 and we'll pay $200 a day towards hospitalization, which is like nothing. So the mini med type plans don't count. But if you've got a qualified, an Affordable Care Act compliant individual plan, a group health plan, Medicare, Medi-Cal, VA coverage, these all are considered qualified medical insurance.
Okay. So yes, Yasmin.
One question now, Colleen. If you're starting a business, a new business, now a small business is 500 employees or less. Is that correct?
According to the SBA, yeah.
Okay. Now, by saying that, do you need to have insurance for yourself or my employees? Is it mandatory?
As far as the insurance world is concerned, small group health insurance used to be a company under 50 employees. Many states have now raised that to 100 employees. So technically, if you are a small business with fewer than 100 employees, you are not required to offer group health insurance. A lot of people don't realize that. And I have had employers call me saying, oh my God, my employees just called, somebody's just called me on the carpet and said, I have to have a group health plan. Well, how many employees do you have? I have 3. Those situations you are not required to. And I encourage my employers with smaller companies, if you want to do this, that's great. It's an excellent recruiting and retention tool, but don't be pushed into it.
And Rasu, do you have any suggestions for someone that's starting a new business also?
Well, I think you got the legal issue, and is California 50 or 100?
100.
California is 100. I have to always double check my notes, but what you have to do and what you can do and what you should do are 3 different things. Have to, if you're under 100, vast majority of small businesses are certainly startups. Are you going to be at a competitive disadvantage if you don't? And that's where maybe you should. That's where you have to either find a good health insurance plan. There's a lot of options about premium subsidies. There's a lot of options around non-traditional that are non-qualified plans or ERISA plans that you can buy, to use that duck with the blue t-shirt as an example without pushing their name. Those aren't qualified, but they may help with the competitive situation. And you can pick up the cost of that for less than typically $20 an employee a month. But it's not health insurance according to the ACA or typical usage.
Okay. Let's kind of talk a little bit about using human resources. Do we need an HR guy if I'm only using contractors, for gig talent?
Yeah,
that's my field.
That's a big question I get a lot. Hey, I'm a solopreneur. I'm just starting my company, but I use a phalanx of contractors, the people who come in and do one thing, or gig employees. The gig employees is kind of the Uber Lyft model, but it's also been in place for years with graphic designers have always been gig employees and things like that, where you come in, you do a project and you go. The answer to your question, though, do you need an HR guy? The question is, do you need to get things done through other people?
Right.
Now, if they're not W-2 employees, a lot of the legal issues don't kick in, the regulatory issues. But I operate from a standpoint of, I'm not so much worried about what the law says. If you're doing the right thing, the law doesn't get in the way. So if you're getting things done through other people, 1099 or gig or contractors, or however you want to call those, alliances, and you have leadership challenges, yeah, I can help. That's when HR really adds value. I like to use the phrase, we've got this garden called a company. We want to focus on the produce, not the weeds. And so many employment attorneys are always making sure the weeds are there, and so they can sue you. I hope there aren't any lawyers going to sue this. I certainly respect the profession, but it's the only profession I've ever seen that makes money when things aren't going right.
Okay.
And makes money when arguing makes them more money. So should you? Yes.
Okay.
I have a quick question. I know it's so confusing right now, and especially with so much changes going on. Could you kind of clear up some of these? There's wow, I have no idea what's left and what's right, or what's up and what's down. Can you please
Clarify, like employee status or?
Yes, employee status, correct. Thank you so much.
Okay, well, the default and the language is, hey, this is my employee. And that means legally there are 2 entities that are really concerned about this question of how you classify your workforce. And it's the Department of Labor, and they're concerned, are you paying the minimum wage? Are you paying time and a half for overtime, depending on what the local jurisdiction laws are? Are you treating them in terms of fairness for discrimination claims and things like that? Those are employees, also known as W-2 employees, because you issue them a paycheck and you withhold the taxes. That's what the Department of Labor cares about. Are you treating your employees fairly? If they're not employees, that's not a question. So if they holding taxes is the key difference, where this other agency you may have heard of called the IRS gets involved. The IRS wants to collect the employer taxes. The employer taxes are roughly, depending again where you are, give or take about 10% of the employee's wages, between the Social Security, Medicare match, unemployment, workers' compensation, all the other mandatory taxes. So if I'm paying somebody $50,000 a year, it's $55,000, including the employment taxes, give or take. I'm rounding. Now the IRS wants to get that. Same's true for gig, and these are called 1099. You're only 1099 if you have a certain threshold of amount you pay them. Otherwise, you just pay them gig and you go away. But the IRS wants that money. The California Department of Revenue wants that money, which is why the Dynamex ruling is so profound in California. That the Dynamex was the delivery company, and the Uber and Lyft are the most, DoorDash, companies like that, never considered the people doing the work as employees.
Right.
In California, I don't know how deep we want to go. In California, there's what they call the ABC test. The IRS has a 12 or 14 point test, of course. But basically it comes down to, do they control their own time, work, and means of production? Do they set their own schedule? And do they do business with other people other than yourself? In other words, you're not their only employer. Now, California added a thing is in Dynamex, it said, if they're doing substantially the same work that your company does, how can they be a contractor? How can they be 1099? How can they be gig? They do what you do. Uber provides passenger service. Well, Uber said, no, we're not a driving company. We're an appointment setting company. We don't drive a car. But I had a guy in a networking meeting a couple of weeks ago who has a private car business, and he drives for it. It's a small company. And he said, all my other drivers are 1099. And I said, oh, no, that can't happen in California. And he said, well, my attorney says you can. I said, good, pay your attorney for being wrong. That's fine.
The thing that drove it home for me, the 3-point test, I can never remember the first point, Russell. I can never remember the third point. But the point about if what they're doing is integral to your business, that's what knocks out most people. I used to have a part-time assistant who I used as a 1099 because I used her very sporadically. Because she runs quotes and I'm an insurance agent, that's pretty much integral to what I do. Now, the graphic designer I hired to do my company brochure, that's not integral. So, I think that's what people need to keep in mind is, point number 2, do they do something integral to your business? And that knocks most of them out.
And that's unique to California. And
Figures.
you made a great distinction with your assistant. If I hire a virtual assistant who handles my mail, my appointments, types up correspondence, do people type anymore? They produce correspondence. If they're doing admin support work and they're doing it for other people, they're not an employee. However, if they do research on employment claims, if they help me put together presentations for what they do, if they help me conduct training classes, then they're doing what I do as a core. Now, this is where the exceptions all kicked in since this law was passed. The first group, surprisingly, was the attorneys who carved out an exception. Because frequently with law firms, they won't do the work, but they are of counsel with another law firm. Well, that's okay, but if they hire an attorney of counsel who's not a corporation, doesn't have their own client base, they're just using this as a loophole, then that was considered the work of the firm, of the law firm. The attorneys carved a special exception out. There's special exceptions for attorneys, accountants who employ a lot of contractors during tax season. They don't employ them year round. And there's a carve out for hairdressers and barbers and things like that where they do booth rent. So all these special interests for good business reasons applied for and got exceptions. Uber and Lyft, actually, it went to the point of a referendum specifically to them, and they lost. So they had to, in compromise, they did things like offered minimum level of health insurance, guarantee a minimum wage. So they met some of the key requirements. And that's another one in California. If they have more than 100 people, as you said, then they have to offer health insurance. Well, they offered a very bare bones health insurance policy if you drive a certain number of hours. a week. So I don't know if that was more information than you were asking, but that's kind of, that's the complexity of this law. It doesn't work. The whole overtime law doesn't work in a gig economy. Kind of stretch the question. How do you track the hours worked of a non-exempt employee that you never see? And so the basic requirement of the Fair Labor Standards Act, you track their time, is hard to do. And it's an honor it's based on your record keeping. There's no central time clocks anymore. When that law was passed in 1938, people literally had to walk in and punch a clock. They had this, I don't know, time cards that they literally put in a clock and it stamped them. So that doesn't, there's ways around it now, but it's tests the whole basis of that law, which is, like I said, 80 years old.
I think I know the answer to the next question, but if we are considering individuals as private contractors, are they required to be provided insurance by the company that's hiring them?
No.
And no.
No, in fact, in the group health insurance arena, pretty much, I'd say like 98% of the time, people do need to be a W-2 employee. There were a couple of carriers that would offer coverage to 1099 employees, but it had to be below a certain percent of the total number of employees. They had to have been there for at least a year. They had to provide tax returns. So pretty much 1099s, you don't have to offer coverage.
Okay. So let's just kind of go that away. So we're gonna, I guess, go back to the first one. What are the options for 1099ers
Around health insurance?
when it comes to insurance? When it comes to insurance,
Well, they can do, there are a few things that come up. They could do individual health plans, and I do a lot of individual health business. Used to be those all went through medical underwriting, so people could be rated up if there was a problem, or they could be outright declined. Well, since the Affordable Care Act hit, now everybody, I mean, whether you're in peak physical condition or a total medical train wreck, the carriers do have to take you at a standard rate. And that's part of why the rates have gone up so much. So an individual health plan is an option. If they left a job and they had group health insurance through that job, COBRA would be an option as well. COBRA used to be the saving grace, because if you had health conditions, you couldn't get an individual plan. It was always significantly more expensive, but now there are, COBRA rates aren't necessarily a whole lot more than individual plan rates, and at times they're equal or less. So you really need to compare the two. Sometimes staying with COBRA is a good option, especially if you've met your deductible or your out-of-pocket maximum for the year. And then if you're really lucky, your new employer offers a group health plan.
Now the question, Colleen, if you do an individual plan through Covered California, I know that there's a lot of premium subsidies available, but those aren't available if you're on a COBRA plan. Is that correct?
Normally, no. Great question to ask. Normally, when you are on COBRA, you're paying the whole ticket. You're paying the entire cost of the insurance, excuse me, plus an administrative fee. In the latest American Rescue Plan Act, the ARPA, there are now subsidies for COBRA where the employer or the insurance company will pay the entire amount of your premium. So that is going to be a very short-term thing so far, effective April 1st through the end of September. So what can happen, and this, you want to talk about convoluted. So what will happen now is employers have to find all their people that are insured via COBRA, let them know of this option if they were on COBRA or if they declined COBRA. They actually have a do-over. So if you declined the COBRA option in January, but now it's May and you're saying, hey, they'll pay all my premium, great. They have a second opportunity to enroll. This will run until the end of September. And that's very, very, very unusual. There is subsidized coverage available through Covered California. That is separate. That has nothing to do with the COBRA subsidies.
So let's kind of shift a little bit. Russell, let's talk with you a little bit about human resources and how that is handled now in a world where a lot of the things that we do is virtual. How do you handle human resources virtually, or do you?
Well, yeah, I would say my practice is 100% virtual.
Oh, okay.
In the last 15 months, I have been physically with a client twice. And so I think I've spoken before about this being a great opportunity for employers because now talent is borderless. I can hire somebody regardless of their category that can be in Sri Lanka or, heaven forbid, Youngstown, Ohio. Nothing about Ohio, but it doesn't matter where they are anymore for a lot of jobs. Now, if they're manufacturing, retail, restaurants, obviously you have to have hands-on. And my manufacturing clients have to have people running the equipment in their manufacturing plant. But all their office staff, their project managers, their people that do production planning, all those things can be done anywhere. And so there's an opportunity to hire anywhere. And when you have somebody, I got a situation with one of my clients, the employee's mother got sick. They wanted to move back home with their mother. They put in their resignation. I said, no, we'll just have you work from Washington State. It's a great opportunity, fantastic opportunity. The challenges are culture, collaboration, and accountability. And that's where I focus. And again, those three things don't matter their employee status, their legal status. How do you manifest and maintain your company culture, which is extremely important differentiator? How do you hold people accountable, and how do people solve problems together? In a traditional office setting, I have a question, I would turn around and say, hey, Sally, have you ever seen this before? Oh yeah, I've seen this 100 times. Here's what I've done. So those are the things that you have to focus on with this opportunity. There are those three key challenges. Then there's the employee challenge that comes into culture is I feel isolated. I feel alone. I'm depressed because I never talk to people. And so you'll see a whole lot of things coming on now where you have online games, online trivia, online company meetings, online engagement. There's a online scavenger hunt that's a blast to run with your employees. It's focused on finding things in your home. So there's things that you have to do. But the number one is you have to make almost continual contact with all your remote employees. And I recommend at least once a week.
Russell, I have a good question for you. Now, being an HR person, do you have to have a certification, or is there something? Because in my last employer, the manager was the HR person.
Mhm.
And there was a conflict between being the manager and the HR person, because if you would go to this person, all of a sudden the next week somebody would get a write-up. And I was noticing that, and no one was really wanted to come and say anything to the HR person because you would get a write-up, and it was for the ridiculous thing. Now, do you need to be certified, or does it, or please explain that to me.
Fortunately or fortunately, unlike a CPA or a lawyer, there is no legal requirement to have a credential to be an HR guy, an HR specialist, or a business coach. And there's a lot of folks that practice without any background, or they say they have the background and don't prove it. Now, you can get certifications. I've had a couple. I'm about to get a third, but I don't use that because to me, it's a matter of my experience, not whether or not I can pass a test. But that's in my opinion. Now, I think in insurance, you have to have a license, clearly to practice. So there's certain things, and it wouldn't surprise me at some point they require that. But the reason my business exists is what you just said. A lot of small business owners aren't HR professionals. They're pie makers, or they're engineers, or they're architects, or they're insurance company owners. And they don't have the background in HR. So when an employee has an issue and they're going to the person they have an issue with, that doesn't work. And in a lot of small businesses, that's exactly the case. Now, in legally, when you have a sexual harassment or hostile work environment claim and the perpetrator, the accused perpetrator is the owner of the business, California and a lot of other states require you to have an outside contact to handle sexual harassment and hostile work environment claims. Because if my boss is being a jerk, who do I go complain to?
Right.
And you know, and that's philosophically, if you have a sexual harassment or hostile work environment, you're a jerk. That's the bottom line. And you know, there's a lot of training required in California. If you have more than 5 employees, you have to train every year. You have to train new hires within 90 days. And one of the key things is, here's our outside contact. A lot of times it's law firms. I don't charge as much as they do. They can list me. And I'm the contact on several of my clients for those type of situations. But, you know, how do you coach people on their performance? How do you coach people on their career development? How do you coach people on communication? There's no certification for that, but it's experience. And I've been doing this since a long time.
Thank you for your honesty. Thank you. Okay.
That is an area that I see with my small group clients that is seriously lacking. They just don't know how to handle things. And the whole 1099 worker is a prime example. So yeah, a good HR consultant is invaluable.
Well, in a hostile work environment, sexual harassment situation, it can be a 1099 employee who files a complaint. It can be a vendor files a complaint. It can be a vendor who's perpetrating the problem.
Right.
The workplace is responsibility of the owner of the company, regardless of their status. And a lot of people don't realize that. Oh, I have a vendor who comes in and harasses my front desk person all the time, hitting up on her. Well, that's a hostile work environment, even though it is a guy in a brown suit who delivers packages. If you permit that, if you allow that to continue, you have a hostile work environment.
Right. And if you do not address it, then you are also responsible for it.
In the case of a sexual harassment, hostile work environment claim, once you have been notified, there's legal obligations, the things you have to do. You have to investigate. You have to talk to both parties. You have to have a summary of findings back to the claimant by the petitioner. And if those things don't happen, then you are then liable for the environment that exists in your business. So the affirmative defense is to have an outside person who would do these investigations. You have training, you have policies, you have handbooks, you have posters. Those are affirmative defenses. Well, what do you do in the case where you do have a claim? And that's where an outside person is best to do that.
Very good. Okay, so we are going to change up things a little bit. We've been very respectful of everybody else's time. Now we're going to just open it up and we're going to have a frank discussion. So feel free to jump right in as you feel. Let's kind of go back to Dynamics rulings and AB5. I must admit that's a little bit close to my heart because as an entertainer and someone who in the past before AB5 contracted a lot of individuals to work under my banner. Now AB5 has kind of blown that out of the water. Now, for everyone else who's watching this who are outside of California, your rulings might be a little bit different. So you really need to check with the rulings within your state because it's going to differ. Here in California, there are certain things that were added to that. So that's where the conversation is going to go a little bit. So what would a group be able to do? I think this probably will fall a little bit more towards you, Russell. For us, we're entertainers. I'm a DJ and a master of ceremonies. We do not have unions, so to speak. We do not have these major multi-million-dollar associations, to back us up. So we're kind of writing the tales of other organizations who've already gotten a little bit of a reprieve from AB5. What are some of these, smaller contractors able to do, kind of, be able to stay in business? Because AB5 requires them to use up a large financial, it's a really big financial burden, if you will.
Is it really? The question is it really? And that's where you got to look at the intent of the law versus the application of the law. If I employ an independent graphic designer, I'm probably going to pay them more than an hourly rate I would pay to an employee. I can get a graphic designer for $18 an hour. If I hire a firm, I'm probably going to pay $22 to $25 an hour, or even $50 an hour. So if you really look at, if I brought this person in-house, would it cost me less? The answer is probably, but you do have these additional, the 10% or so employer tax, the requirements when you get to a certain size to offer health insurance. So the cost issue, I think, is somewhat of a red herring, because you are paying a premium to another company to supply a resource. In the construction business, contractors and subcontractors are a long-term relationship, that if I'm a general contractor, I don't have to employ masons and plumbers and electricians or framers. Let's take the union question out of this. But when I hire a subcontractor and they bid on it, they're working in their profit, their taxes, and their cost. So the emotional reaction is it's going to cost me a lot more. In reality, if you look at what you're paying a lot of independent contractors, they already have that built in if they're doing the responsible thing and paying their taxes. So yes, there is an additional on paper expense, but in reality, I don't know if it's that big a deal, is what I advise people. Now, when you have employees, you have more control. That's what the independent contractor, the word independent is very important there, because the independence allows them to say, oh, I'll get this to you Thursday. And if you're unhappy with them, you get another contractor. They can fire you, you can fire them without any strings attached. The other thing about the independent contractor being under your control is they're also more likely to be part of your culture. And they will carry your message. I mean, Colleen, in your business, you've got a brand. There's a whole lot of people that do what you do. There's a whole lot of people do what I do. And you've carefully cultivated a brand and a reputation that an independent contractor, because they're working with other people, they don't have that same zeal about your business. Mm-hmm. So is it worth it to have an ongoing independent contractor? I would argue it's not. Now, if I have a special need and I come in and I do it, yeah, come and go. I'll pay them on that project. Now, the entertainment business, which is pretty big in this area, they have a lot of unions. The reason being is there was a lot of exploitation in the 20s and 30s. If you look at the history of Disney Studios and their union fight, it goes back to, quite frankly, exploitation, which is what the law is geared to protect people from. And when there's a collective bargaining agreement, you always, well, I shouldn't say that because you have union shops. The collective bargaining agreement is going to be more in protection of the employees than AB5. So, in the film industry or the TV industry, certain jobs are SAG-AFTRA and some are not. And that's a negotiated difference between the unions and the producers. Outside of the entertainment business, well, you're in the entertainment business, but you're typically not a SAG-AFTRA situation. I would argue you have the same DJs you're using regularly under your business for different gigs. They should be employees.
Yeah, it's actually very interesting. I'll be honest with you. You and I could have a conversation about this for hours. Particularly for a company like mine, who's is a one operator as opposed to a multi-op. So multi-op DJ companies can actually do that, because if you have 5-6 individuals who you're relying on, you have those 5-6 individuals under your banner because you have that much repeat business. A company like mine that started not that long ago, but it's a one-man operation, and I bring people on board as I need them. And I'll be honest with you, on the first couple of years that a company like mine starts, I might need to hire out twice, to have to make that individual an employee of mine. That would be very difficult. So what happens is, we hold a contract, and then we move on from that. And of course, AB5 has cannot nullify that, but that's only not because of the purpose of what AB5 is all about. It's because of the blanket aspect of it. The fact that, yes, please.
Obviously, you're still up in here, you don't have this question, but the minute you bring somebody on to do the work for you, it becomes a gray area. If you're a entertainment DJ, master of ceremonies business, and you've got a gig Saturday night, you've got another opportunity Saturday night, and you bring on somebody to do the same thing you're doing somewhere else, that would
they're an employee.
They would be an employee.
They're an employee. Yeah, there's no ambiguity about that at all. The fact is that it does not become affordable for a company like mine to have an employee at the beginning of a company, to have one employee, for the one off.
If you pay them on an engagement basis or an hourly rate, I'm not sure it's more expensive.
Actually, it is. It is. And this is why I said you and I could be talking about this for hours, because the way that, contracts are handled in our business are very individual. They're not stamped. I agree. You'll go to the guy who lives right next to me, who might be a DJ, and his fees for the exact same thing that I'm going to do are just so far differently, either up or down, that it does make.
That's the ambiguity of AB5.
Yes.
This one guy I was talking about has his own private car, black car service. He got really popular. He got in with the NBA, and whenever the Lakers or the Clippers have visiting teams,
right,
they would call him and say, "Hey, let's get cars for these guys. We don't want them jumping in taxis." And he offers extra large vehicles for 7-foot tall people. But the minute he went from him doing all the driving to 8 people doing all the driving, that crossed the line.
Sure.
When you have an independent contractor, you need an independent contractor agreement with them that specifies very clearly they're responsible for things like unemployment tax, workers' compensation claims, as well as the tax withholding. And that is, again, an affirmative defense. Whether or not it passes this new test, that's the gray area. And we're all working through that. It is, again, I understand the intent of the law, but the application of the law is extremely disruptive. Extremely.
Colleen, do you have any comments about this too? Or any suggestions?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
No, Colleen. I was asking Colleen also.
Well, I was just going to mention, Russell had mentioned some job areas where they were exempted from AB5. Insurance agents, independent insurance agents also were exempted from this. And when you look at it, a lot of people say, "Oh yeah, big money lobbying groups." Well, the reality is, as an independent agent, I'm contracted with 25 to 30 different insurance companies. Who's going to pay my vacation time? Who's going to pay for my benefits? We're not hourly.
Who's going to buy your computer?
Exactly. We're not hourly people. The way we're paid percentage commissions usually. So it was just going to be a mess. Some companies I put a lot of business with every month. Some companies I put 2 policies a year with. So believe me, we get hit up on taxes plenty, but not all occupations are going to be able to be fit into this, but California did not take that into consideration.
Well, and again, your business has a strong lobby. And the insurance industry went to the California legislature and got that set aside. There's a major commercial cleaning company called JanPro that was also cited in the AB5 legislation, because JanPro's model is they train and supply people who provide commercial janitorial services as a sub-franchise. Then you get the whole franchise question here. You know, is State Farm a franchise or did you buy an agency? And so the whole franchise aspect of AB5 is still in dispute, because one could argue that insurance is a franchise business. I don't think it is. You know, you're offering someone else's brand, which is kind of the definition of a franchise, but they got a specific carve out. Unfortunately, the DJs don't have that kind of lobbying power.
No, we got a lot of very important you know, DJs out there touring the world, but
Well, if you ever want to do something fun, do a study of the percentage of the people who get elected to office that are lawyers and insurance agents. It's the two largest, and real estate's number 3. Real estate also has a carve out. But those are the 3 most common professions of people who get elected. Why? They can control their time, and they can carve out a percentage of their time for public service. There aren't many DJs in the state legislature.
No,
There are 2.
and until the world changed, I would have been able to carve out a piece of my time, because the way that my schedule worked was I was totally independent.
Right.
You know, I could have woken up in the morning, gone. But this is what we're talking about. You know, we're talking about changes. We're talking about, you know, the fact that you know, you need to kind of change and adapt. So, Colleen, what's coming up the pike? Are we still in? Currently, we are at the tail end. No, the beginning of May. We're at the beginning of May 2021. Are we in the midst of open enrollment?
Well, depends on how you look at it.
I love it when I ask a question and it's so open-ended that we could talk about this forever. Yes.
We have another hour, right? That I can just keep blathering.
We do have quite a bit. I think we'll be here for another 30 minutes or so. Sure.
I'll spare you. Basically, what has happened is the annual open enrollment period applies to the individual market. Group plans still have their annual enrollment, and that could be anytime during the year. But for individual plans, once the ACA hit, it became a calendar year thing. Now, in California, open enrollment technically ended January 31st, but we had this little pandemic thing going on. So there was an extension through May 15th. If people were not insured, they somehow didn't figure out for the 3 months that open enrollment was open that they needed coverage, then they could apply, and that's going to run until May 15th. If people have a qualifying event, they lose a job, they get married, they get divorced, those are qualifying events to enroll in an individual health plan. Now that we've got this whole change from the ARPA, with an increase in subsidies potentially available through Covered California, the president signed into law the fact that the maximum amount people could pay for health insurance was going to drop from 9.6% of their income to 8.5% of their income. Well, that increases the subsidy amount. People that were on the border before and just missed being eligible for subsidies, they may be eligible for subsidies now. So from now until the end of the year, people can go from a direct non-covered California plan to a covered California plan. And the reason to do that would be if you find that they're eligible for subsidies. So I'm working with a lot of people on that right now. One of the things that normally happens when you change plans, even if it's within the same company, is any expenses that you've had accrue towards your deductible or out-of-pocket maximum, usually that all resets. And that's a big deterrent to a lot of people to make a plan change. This one time, and who knows if it's going to continue, but this one time, if you stay with the same company, whatever you've accrued so far will roll over to the new on-exchange covered California plan. And that's huge for a lot of people. I mean, I've had people, I've told people not to change plans because they've had huge hellacious expenses and their deductibles met. Their $8,000 out of pocket is met. So for them to have to start over is not good. Right now, it will roll over, but you do have to stay with the same carrier. So we've got a special enrollment period to the end of the year.
Okay, and so okay, so all the variations of different things that can actually happen within it, somebody needs to come and see you. There's just no ifs and buts about that. This is not something that they should go online and start filling out the forms on their own.
It doesn't cost you anything to use an independent agent. We're paid by the company we place the business with. So why not?
Very important point. Very important.
Absolutely. The rates are the rates. You used to hear a lot of agents say, oh, I can get you a better rate. Really? Can you? No, you can't. That might have been a possibility when medical underwriting was still involved and you could go to bat for somebody, but now everybody's individually rated. So the rates are the rates. Work with an agent that you're comfortable with. They don't need to be your best friend for life, but if you don't like them or you don't want to talk to them or they don't return your calls, call somebody else because there's plenty of us out there. It's still, the Affordable Care Act was well-intentioned and it has helped some people, but things have not gotten more affordable. It is not easier to navigate. It's still pretty confusing. And this year, confusion reigns supreme, that's for sure.
It is so confusing, you're right. Thank you for the clarification. Yeah.
Absolutely. Russell, I believe you wanted to chime in somewhere in there.
I was just going to tell a quick joke. When somebody says depends, I think about the adult undergarments if they're having these problems. That's what depends is full of. But
You're here.
Well, if you've been around long enough to need depends, you've earned the right to,
well, they make them sexy now.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. That's very interesting.
Victoria depends.
All right. So let's talk about a little bit of employment law. I'm putting you on the spot, Russell. What's coming up the pike now? So California is in the middle of a political battle, recalling the governor. Lots of things going on.
Well, politics is kind of like a pendulum. It swings back and forth. And right now, federally, we've swung toward a high government involvement administration. Previously, we had a low government, in fact, anti-government administration in some cases, particularly in the Department of Labor. So you saw a tremendous drop in EO claims accepted, as the EOC makes a decision whether or not there's a case of discrimination. Well, under the previous administration, the default was turn it down unless you can't. Under the current administration, with the new Department of Labor and the new regulators, let's look for cases. So I think coming down the pike is a philosophical shift at the federal level. The state of California is always ahead of the trend. I think that, if you look at the current California administration, it's probably on the government activist level. And the pushback and the recall is about government's too much in my life, notwithstanding the merits of either side. So I think from a federal level, I don't know what's going to happen in California. We'll find out this fall. But I would anticipate California not losing its pro-government approach overall. Even a conservative in California is a moderate in the rest of the country, quite frankly. There's some extremes, and we all know who they are and where they are. But at the federal level, you're going to see a greater involvement, a greater likelihood of federal action being taken on Department of Labor, Department of Commerce, IRS, just because of the philosophy of the person in that round office or oval office. In terms of legislation, and this will probably, I'm going to watch Colleen's face when I say this, Medicare for all. And of course she goes, what? We're, and there's arguments, pros and cons on that, but there's a strong force in the elected party right now to replace private health insurance. I don't know if that's going to happen or not, Colleen. I don't know what your sources are telling you. I think it, I have an opinion, but that's a likely challenge that's going to come up in the next year and a half. And I say year and a half because there's midterm elections could change this whole calculus. But the bills that are going to come up this time next year before the election are going to be very potentially impactful in a lot of areas. California is often the leading edge for requiring, again, we talked about sexual harassment workshops. California is the first state to require those if you have 5 or more employees. Everybody else recommends them or suggests them. So I think you're going to see a lot of the things that where government has more of their fingers in your business are going to increase.
Yeah, indeed. So yeah, Colleen, you have something to say about Medicare for All?
Couple of things. Medicare for All, if that comes through, is not going to be the Medicare you know now. It's there are definitely going to be changes, and it's not going to be the panacea that it is now. Our national organization, the feeling that they are getting is that President Biden isn't really a proponent of Medicare for All, because part of his legacy was so tied to the Affordable Care Act. He was vice president when that passed. And as we all know, on an accidental hot mic, he expressed what a big deal that was. California, of course, being California, we have AB 1400 in the offing. That is a second single payer bill that has been reintroduced. It has been shelved for the rest of the year. But basically what that would be is a single payer system, which means there would be no group health insurance, there would be no individual, there would be no Medicare, no Medi-Cal, no VA, nothing other than the state of California paying the claims. The initial government estimate on that for the cost of that is $400 billion. The state budget isn't quite $200 billion. And, you know, at $400 billion, we all know how accurate government estimates tend to be. When that was originally introduced as SB 560, as AB 562, the thought was that because they would take over Medicare, they were going to go to the federal government and get the money, you know, the 200 billion or so that the government paid for Medicare related stuff. They were going to go and get that from the federal government, and that was going to help fund it. You know, I don't know how likely that would have been under a Trump administration, but so yes, there's all sorts of stuff. Nothing's definite yet. There are definitely changes that need to be made in the ACA. It was well intentioned, but there are some pitfalls. Medicare for All, hey, I'm 3 or so years away from it, so I'm good. Fine with me.
And we also talk about pushing Medicare to 60 instead of 65, and a lot of us are in it, aren't we?
Yeah.
But
we'll see.
I like the way you said well-intended. So many of these regulations that are on us have great intent to protect people from the bad guys. But the Family Medical Leave Act is a great example.
Yeah.
An act that has great intent and, you know, is possibly going to be expanded. I think they just put in for the COVID period 14 additional or 80 additional hours of paid leave. A small business can't afford to give all their employees all this time off, but the intent is good. But the Family Medical Leave Act is considered the worst law ever written in terms of administration and application. Now, everybody has a different opinion on that, but it's horrible. The record keeping requirements for the Family Medical Leave Act are absurd. You know, and the whole the tax credits thing says the CPA Full Employment Act.
Yes. No, oh, sorry.
No, please.
No, that is tough. You know, a lot of legislators have never signed the front of a paycheck. Very few of them are business owners. So yes, it's great to have all these free things going out. You have to remember that free is very expensive. Not only does an employer have to pay this 80 hours of leave time, they can't give away the job. They can't fill it with somebody else. They have to hold that job open for a certain period of time. And that's a hardship as well.
Or deal with the person who's doing the function once that other person's come back.
Right.
You know, in LA, they passed a law on recall. You know, you've got tens of thousands of restaurant workers who were laid off a year ago. I mean, literally tens of thousands in the hotel, hospitality, restaurant business. LA says you have to return them to work based on seniority. Well, some of your worst employees may be your senior employees, but because the government wants to protect them, you have to recall your worst employees first. So you get a union, which is, I think, the underlying intent to have everybody part of an organized labor organization. Now, we can have many beers over whether or not that's a good thing or bad thing. But, you know, the fact is if I have to recall based on when they were originally hired, and then you got the rehire date, you know, is it their rehire date or their original hire date? All those things haven't been thought through by the LA governments.
Yeah.
That's another example of a great intent, but small business owners going, my head's exploding.
Absolutely. You know, we've experienced a lot of changes, and of course, as it's always true in business and in life, a lot of changes are still to come. We are just a few minutes away from concluding our presentation for today, but I kind of would like for the two of you to leave us off with. I had my question, and I said one of the most interesting cases you've worked with, Russell. Do you have any good stories for us?
I've been doing this for decades. I think
maybe a human resource issue, or
I think, you know, in terms of the most rewarding situation that I've encountered was I had a professional services firm, an engineering firm. Engineers are notoriously non-communicators. They are just really good at details, are really good at exactions. And I got involved with this company probably 12 or 15 years ago when they had 12 people. The thing that I have helped them work on, the thing that has benefited this company the most, is better leadership. So I've trained people on how to communicate, how to respond to employees, how to put in place clearing policies. You know, on the other side, I had in the sexual harassment situation, I had a long-term client call me. He's a retailer with 15 locations. And this was another win in a way. An employee ran out of one of his stores crying. One of her coworkers called the owner, not the store manager, and said, do you know that such and such just ran out of here crying? I followed her in the parking lot. The manager, the store manager, followed her into a stockroom and started asking her, did she like to work there? Did she like working for him? And then he leaned back and locked the door and said, I want you to show me how much you enjoy working with me. Okay, so I get a call. My client calls me and says, tells me what happened. He said, what do I do? I said, is this manager still in the building? Well, yeah, send them home now.
Yeah,
Pay
absolutely.
them if you want to. If they're exempt, you have to pay them for the day. Another legacy of the Fair Labor Standards Act. What happened was I helped the client conduct a rapid investigation. We terminated that manager, and we were able to keep the employee because we dealt with it in an affirmative action. So is that kind of what you? I mean, there's, you know, I could tell stories for some.
Well, yeah, no, Russell, I know you could. This is actually a good story from your example, and a really good example for everybody else out there who's watching this presentation. That you know, these kind of things are never to be taken lightly. They need to be acted upon. And if later on you need to apologize to an employee because things might have gone a little bit, you know, awry, then you apologize to them. But you need to act quickly to protect those who might have been wrong.
And you got to be careful with apology. That's not an admission of guilt.
Yeah, no, not absolutely not. But personally, I much rather just remove a manager and send them home for the day, and then come back later on and go, oh, I'm sorry, I'm sorry I had to do that or something. But rather than leave them and have, you know, more people be accosted, or, you know, that's just.
Well, again, and in a positive case, that company that when I started working with had 12 people, they're up to 75 now, with a very highly engaged, happy workforce because of some of the things that they put in place to make sure their employees feel appreciated, their employees are given the right amount of attention. Is it perfect? No. I've got one manager whose emotional intelligence is terrible, and that can be worked on. Unfortunately, you have to be coachable to do that.
All right, Russell. So I'm gonna move on to Colleen. Colleen, I'm gonna preempt by saying that a lot of people think insurance is boring, but I've known you for a long time, and the way that you make insurance, it's not. So
there's a reason I don't do employee benefits, Jim. I find Colleen and I say, Colleen, here's a client. They want to put in a competitive plan, and here's their and Colleen and her counterparts work magic. I don't run payrolls and I don't do employee benefits because they're just to segue to you, it is an incredibly complicated area of HR.
It
Yeah.
can't be, absolutely.
Yeah. So tell us, a cool story to leave us with, if you will.
Well, I had more cool stories from my prior occupation. I used to be an emergency room nurse doing trauma nursing in downtown LA and Hollywood. There's an hour for you.
Well, they make TV shows about that.
Oh yeah,
So.
oh yeah. Well, I got some doozies. But on the insurance side, I was thinking about that when you first asked it. There have been many instances, nobody likes paying for health insurance. I get that. Believe me, I get no breaks on mine, that's for sure. But there have been many situations where I've helped people get into plans and I've gotten calls later saying, oh my God, I can't believe what happened. I know I didn't want to do it, but then I got into this accident and. So to help save people from absolute financial ruin, even though they're paying what they think is a ridiculous amount for their insurance, man, what's the one thing you can't get when you need it the most? Insurance.
Yes.
It's really tough. And I thought back to many, many years ago, one of my group plans, it was a very small plan. It was a small independent church and husband and two couples were starting this church. And they needed the plan to come into play fairly quickly. Now that always makes me nervous because it's like, okay, what are you not telling me? What's wrong and what's about to blow up? And in individual plans, when you get a call from a young woman saying, how soon can you get me insured? She's either pregnant or something's going on. But this one small case, they needed to get it into play fairly quickly. And they had selected an HMO plan that was going to be fine. Well, I got a call that the one wife needed emergency surgery very quickly because she had a pituitary gland tumor that all of a sudden was starting to grow and it was starting to impinge on her optic nerve and she was at risk of going blind. Now, I got the plan approved quickly, but it still takes 2 or 3 days to set things up. It has to be in the system. You have to have primary care doctors assigned. It's not a flip of a switch right away.
Right.
I called the general agency I was using at the time. I told them the situation. I said, I need this expedited. I mean, is there anything you can do? I mean, this woman needs surgery and nobody's going to do it on a promise of payment. The representative I normally would work with wasn't there. And I got a call back the next morning from another representative who had an in at the insurance company that we placed the business with. This thing was set up overnight and the client was able to get surgery the following day. The irony, and even now I still get chills from it because the irony was this woman who helped me get it done, her daughter had the exact same tumor. Ooh. And needed emergency surgery and almost went blind. So she moved heaven and earth to get this done. There are warm and fuzzies in the insurance world when you can get people what they need. It doesn't always come as quickly as they want, but you got to try.
Absolutely. Very good. It's the reason why I asked that. And it's a really great way of concluding today's presentation.
Thank you.
Colleen King, thank you very much for being with us. Really appreciate it. Russell Lookadoo, thank you very much. I really appreciate you taking the time, from your schedule.
And just a quick note, I just interrupt you, but if anyone wants to contact any of these fabulous people, we're putting the information at the end. So it will be there. Please contact them and reach out to them. And thank you for embracing the changes.
And if I may, if you need an MC and DJ, call Josef. Josef did my wedding 4 years ago and was very well received. So
there's an awesome picture out there in social media land of the back of my head while Colleen is about to throw the bouquet. I get more questions about that than anything else for some reason. So whenever it is that you're watching this presentation, the information for both Russell and Colleen will either be in the description or in the comments or somewhere like that. So once again, Thank you for being with us. My name is Josefschein, my co-host Yasmin Flores, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.
Goodbye, everyone.